after a couple more loops, start thinking this could be it, which was probably the fourth or fifth time in my life before I was 19 through paddling that I'd thought that.
Hello, and thanks for joining. Today's episode is part 2 with Gareth Fryer. If you haven't already listened to part 1 of the episode, be sure to give it a listen first. Today, I'm excited to bring on a new sponsor to the show, Four Corners River Sports. I love this shop. I'm a longtime customer. Many of my friends are customers. They have awesome staff who provide retail and online sales. Four Corners River Sports is located in Durango, Colorado. They're a full-service paddle sports retail and rental store. If you're looking to get on the water, look no further than Four Corners River Sports. Call them at 970-259-3893 or visit their website at www.riversports.com. This episode is also sponsored by Taylor Barker with the Group Real Estate Steamboat. I've known and paddled with Taylor for years, and he brings passion to everything he does. Steamboat Springs is a wonderful town with the Yampa River running right through it and has a vibrant and friendly boating community. If you are thinking of making a move to the Steamboat area or purchasing a vacation home, be sure to get in touch with Taylor. He's happy to give you a lay of the land, the real estate market, and to help you find the perfect property for you. You can reach him at 336-314-4353 or by email at taylor@brokerintheboat.com. You can find those links in the show notes. This podcast is being featured on paddlinglife.com. Paddlinglife.com does a wonderful job of finding all the most interesting happenings in the world of paddling and bringing them straight to you in the form of news, interviews, articles, videos, and more. Check out paddlinglife.com. The episode today focuses on river safety, an area of paddling that Gareth has a passion for and would like to share with a wider audience. If you're a whitewater paddler and don't have a passion for whitewater safety, you probably should. When you hear some of the incidents that led to his interest in whitewater safety, you might wonder why he continues to paddle at all. But rather than quitting, Gareth has developed systems for running rivers smarter. And as Nick Wigston noted in an earlier episode, it's when things go wrong that good stories are made, but there's a serious side to things going wrong, which I suppose was a natural evolution of a podcast based on whitewater tales. So get prepared for the serious side of what can go wrong in a dynamic environment and find out the techniques Gareth has honed over the years to mitigate those risks. On to part 2 with Gareth Fryer, the Safety Chronicles.
River rescue, and I guess words I've been playing around with more recently are rivercraft, and I'm not trying to be sexist, but that concept. If you think of the surfing culture, and they talk about Laird Hamilton or Kelly Slater or Kai Lenny and their watermen or waterwomen, and so the way I look at it now is it's like I feel like there's people out there in the river environment, whether they're raft guides or pack rafters or river surfers or canyoners or kayakers, and there's people who just go kayaking and it's their part-time thing and it's an occasional thing, or maybe they're not that tuned into other aspects of it. Whereas there's other users of the river who the river and paddling in whatever form has become their life, and all aspects of that life hopefully are growing those people, and we all know them in our environments or on our horizons. We know people who are more attuned with how the river works, and their intuition of where something might kick off, or running a team well, or managing things, or trying to teach paddling culture the best way possible. Like this, I don't believe in like putting people on a guru type pedestal, but I really like to appreciate other people, and I like to look at those people who I think are doing something better than me, and rather than just worshipping them and going, I could never be that, I like to try and think of it like, how can I get closer to where they're at, and likewise, as someone who has some skills, how can I bring people up to my level and increase their knowledge base and stuff, and for me, a lot of it is questioning, and being honest and being brave. And I often think that to get to a heightened, higher level of something, we often have to give something up. And in a paddling sense, that might mean that we're on a river with someone, and sometimes you get on a river with someone you don't know, and you might be sizing each other up, and it's not necessarily in a totally bad competitive way, but sometimes what happens is that people fall into this, oh, I'm not sure they're better than me, or I'm better, so who should be the leader of this group right now? And so sometimes there's no leader of the group because people aren't sure of their standing or where it sits, or how to manage that situation and stuff. Whereas I find, like, if someone has something that I want to learn or something I want to get better at, if I'm willing to put, and like I said, I don't like ego. I think ego is a dirty word. Do I have an ego? For sure, but I try to put it aside as much as I can. I also try to acknowledge when it's getting in the way and when it's costing me learning or making a situation worse. And so I think that if I can go to another paddler and say, dude, you're awesome, you're much better at that than me, or you're a better paddler than me, can you teach me that thing? And so in that moment, I'm giving something up. I might be giving up my perceived place or my real place in that hierarchy, and I'm giving up my ego, and I'm giving up to them, I acknowledge that you're the better paddler, or you're better than me at this thing. Can you please teach me? And for me, that's a great way to approach learning, is that I'm all in, I'm more committed to the learning than I am to trying to pretend or masquerade or hang out in this other space that I'm trying to maintain, kind of thing. I go and do some rescue training in New Zealand every year, which is a fantastic course. So it's put on by the New Zealand Rivers Association, which used to be the Rafting Association. And as an association, if you spoke to an experienced raft guide there, and I'm not a raft guide, I've done some safety kayaking. I'm a kayaker, but I've identified that there's a huge breadth of knowledge and learning that I can get from doing this training, and their delivery system of it compared to other courses and training that I've done is awesome. And so it's there isn't a lot of ego in that environment, and it's a model that, in my mind, embraces the reality of the situation. Because when I was younger, one of the people who used to teach rescue courses used to say, and this is a very British viewpoint, that, the first rule of rescue is that the rescuer doesn't endanger themselves. And I don't subscribe to that model. And in my environment as a young man, that particular paddler was put on a guru type pedestal, and generations of paddlers were influenced by that viewpoint and bought into it. And I'm not saying that viewpoint isn't wrong, and we all have to personally decide where we stand with things, but it's not my viewpoint, and it's not something that I advocate. Whereas in the rafting scene, they might just stand up a bit more casually and be like, look, the reality of any rescue situation is that you're probably going to put yourself at some level of risk, and whatever that level of risk, who knows? And again, it's up to the individual to make that choice, kind of thing. And so I think that model sits more with my ethos of life. I grew up, my father was in the SAS and served in Vietnam and Borneo and stuff. So the SAS is basically our version of the Navy SEALs or the Green Berets or really? That type. They're an elite fighting unit and stuff, often operating in small teams and stuff. And so I didn't grow up hearing about the fighting much, but what I heard a lot about was the teamwork side of things. And that's definitely influenced me as a young man and right through to my current life, as far as, and I'm pretty non-serious off the water. I'm serious at work and I'm serious when I'm on the river, but when I'm off the river around kayaking, I'm wreaking havoc left, right, and centre. But on the water, it's a serious business for me, and it always has been. And I value the lives of the people I'm with as much as my own life. And as a more experienced paddler, I now, whether I want to or not, on any given day, I look at it like I have to accept the responsibility to make the odd sacrifice, as far as like maybe I'm carrying more safety gear, maybe I'm getting out to protect more rapids, or whatever those decisions are. But I'm part of the team, and as an experienced kayaker, I've done my time. I've been looked after by other people. I've had this learning, so it's now my time to give back and to be responsible on every trip, and not turn that off when I don't feel like it, let's say. So my sort of paddling pathway started out knocking around in kayaks from probably age 7, largely on flat water, on lakes and flat water sea type environments, just doing lots of re-entry and stuff into these beaten up old fiberglass boats, and getting lots of fiberglass splinters in my thighs because my mother used to do a pretty shitty job of repairing these boats, which was something you never thought about or remembered right in the time, because it was lots of fun. But then the day after, you're walking like a cowboy because your thighs were riddled with fiberglass splintered.
So were these whitewater fiberglass boats, or were they designed?
Yeah, they were old school whitewater fiberglass boats that were relics from the university club that they probably paid $50 each for or something, and they floated. We didn't have spray skirts, and I think the paddles were probably didn't have any offset or something. Like it was pretty basic kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then in Christchurch, where I live, there's a lovely river called the Avon River, which flows through the city, and no rapids or anything. And that's very close to my home. And it still surprises me thinking about this, compared to our the modern day that we live in now. But, I'd go down to a mate's house, we'd jump in one of his canoes or one of my kayaks or something, and we'd be gone for the whole afternoon. We might go several kilometres up the river, just tooling around, and just there wasn't much current, but there was the odd little riffle here and there kind of thing, and just tooling around, and super narrow flow, and checking out people's back gardens, and just mucking around in the river basically. And that was kind of our go-to. And then so cool. My uncle lived about an hour south, and there was a lovely river called the Rikaya which would drive over, and my father did the classic, we'll go kayak that one day from the upper gorge, from the bridge down to there, because he had done some kayaking in the military. But that promise never really came to fruition, and so every time I was like, can we do that? And he was pretty dedicated to his work and trying to earn a living for our family, which was fair enough. And so, other experiences knocking around in boats and stuff. And then I was on a family holiday, I think age 15, further south at a sort of Wanaka and Queenstown, are quite sort of resorty type towns further south in South Island. And I went and paid some money to go pack rafting. And the started our instructional lesson, and the wind picked up, and so they had to cancel it. And so they gave us a partial refund, and whitewater kayaking was the second on my list, and that didn't leave till the afternoon. So I went running down to the booking agency, got my refund, paid for the kayaking, and then went running back to the motel. And my parents were out for the day with my sister, I think, and so I couldn't find a pen, and I didn't have the intelligence to go to the office and ask for a pen. So I wrote on lipstick with my mother's lipstick on the mirror in the bathroom of the motel unit on kayaking, Gareth. And so running back downtown, went off to this river, which was called the Hokitika, which is, this section's very easy, grade 2. And the whole way there, I'm telling the instructors about how amazing I am in a kayak. It's pretty full of myself at 15. And they gave us some instruction to which I probably wasn't listening to, because I knew it all at age 15. And so the very first, breaking into the first bit of current, all the non-kayakers stayed in their boats, whereas Gareth, who knew it all, swam instantly because I dropped my upstream rail and bailed out of it, kind of thing, which I thought was some good karma. but really enjoyed that. Got back to home, and a neighbour had done a Top Sport. Top Sport was a shop that did kayaking courses in Christchurch, and he told me about that experience. And they did a series of sessions, and then you did pull session, no rolling, but you did pull session, flat water, a sea session, some moving water, and then you did a weekend up at the river kind of thing. And so he told me about that, and I was like, that's me. And I'd been working from a young age, just doing part-time jobs and stuff, and so I had some available money, and so and my parents were supportive of stuff as well. But so I went and did that course, and I was hooked. And that was definitely me kind of thing. And so I joined a kayaking club, and that was a really good club called the Waimanui Club, and it had a good sort of family culture type vibe. There weren't any other children my age. Like the next youngest person was 27, so there was definitely a bit of a gap there. And I probably grew up a little bit in ways, and in other ways they probably were wishing I'd grow up some more in a hurry, because I was probably in a different place and stuff, obviously. But it was really positive. However, my third ever river trip, I got taken down a river called the Ashley Gorge, which in retrospect, I probably didn't have any business being there. And it was midwinter, or just coming into winter, I think. And I had a wetsuit with long legs, no arms, and probably a paddle jacket. Took a few swims and started getting cold. I kind of... very early on, I wanted to be as good as I could. And so I'd look at the better paddlers, and I would be trying to get into whatever they were trying to get into, whether it was surfing away or playing in a little hydraulic or something. And remember, this is all on grade 3, so it's pretty low-key stuff. And so I was swimming a fair bit, but didn't really care. But on this particular day, I really did start getting quite cold. And so they decided that the best approach would be for this older chap, Jerry, to hurry me down the river a bit kind of thing. And so that sounded like a plan. Off we set, just the two of us, while everyone else had a better time. And Jerry had forgotten, and the rest of the group too, had forgotten that there was one rapid that had a little bit more consequence to it. And the river flowed onto a bluff and little bit... not so much undercut, but it was quite a flat bluff, so the potential of getting held there. And so sure enough, that's what happened to me. I was paddling a Perception Reflex, which is a plastic slalom boat. It's about 3.6 metres long. And so I'm up against this bluff, not really coming off it. And my hands were so cold that I couldn't find the tab for my spray skirt. Ooh. And so age probably 15 and a half, I'm underwater, freaking out, basically in that state of like, oh my God, I'm about to die kind of thing, which is a bit traumatic for a young 15-year-old who, hadn't really thought about thinking about things like that prior to that. And eventually got the spray skirt off, came out, I was in tears. I wouldn't say it's hysterical, but I probably wasn't far off it. And I wanted to climb out of this gorge up to the road, which wasn't, it was just steep. It wasn't unachievable. But that would have been a bit of a nightmare. And probably looking back at it, Jerry, similar to Rolf, Jerry wouldn't have wanted to walk out of there either. And so maybe that's what led his decision-making of, no, you're staying on the river kind of thing. So he got me down the rest of the river, and we probably rafted up through a few rapids and stuff. And again, I took a little break on paddling after that for a few months, because kept alive with all my early paddling. And so, you can see there was definitely a little break after that one, and probably a little bit of a reassessment of, do I want to keep doing this thing? And I decided I did, and then kind of got back into it. And obviously, summertime is a better time to learn, and then probably started getting a little bit more gear and moved towards getting a dry top at some point and stuff. And had some... so in that club environment, like sometimes it's not always the best paddlers on earth in a club paddling environment. And so sometimes the leadership and decision-making isn't always the best. But in saying that, sometimes in higher-level paddling, the leadership and decision-making isn't always the best as well. Yeah. And so certainly had a few learning experiences over the next few years. Another trip springs to mind where I just swam. It was a big nothing, but then just sea launched back in off the bank. And as soon as I sea launched in, there was an irrigation pipe that was only probably 1.5 inches diameter that went straight over. So I basically sea launched it, went under a loop of this irrigation pipe. So the irrigation pipe's sitting on my on top of my spray skirt. Oh. The flow wasn't too severe, but it was just enough to go like, oh yeah, shit, there's another danger, Another day I had a waist tow line before. Rescue jackets did exist, but I didn't have one. And so this was a waist tow line, which had a release buckle on it. And at one point, I probably thought I was being helpful or rescue or whatever. But the boat ended up downstream of me for a second, and then the boat broached on a rock. And the moment I went past that boat, I got ripped over very quickly, and then fighting to try and find the quick release buckle, which had actually rotated. And so it wasn't where I thought it should be as well. And so, again, another little learning of like, throw that thing away because that thing's going to kill me. So had lots of little learnings growing up in that scene. And then at one point, ironically, it was actually at that same waterfall that we were speaking about, Rolf running in where he boofed in a chapter inner tube. So at that particular rapid, that was a waterfall that we stopped at every time on the way back from this. Another kayaking mecca is called Murchison, where there's probably 12 or 15 different grade 3, grade 4, grade 2, whatever, lovely, easy, beautiful kayaking runs and stuff. So every time you drove past this waterfall, you stopped and you oohed and ahed at the waterfall, and you spoke about the legends who had run it, and the club culture as a whole just implanted and built fear. And
sounds like US clubs too.
Yeah, totally. And so there was speculation, discussion. Oh, you wouldn't run it in that boat. They're renowned for rebounding back into drops and stuff. Which, looking back at it's like, what a crock of shit. But anyway, it's one of those boats was the boats that I paddled naturally. And so every time that we left there, I'd be left with this feeling of really still wanting to achieve that waterfall one day, and feeling like I wimped out a little bit because I wasn't willing to step up that day or something like that. And so anyway, one day we turned up there and there were 3 or 4 Australians who were all paddling these same plastic slalom boats, the same as me, and we're doing laps on this waterfall and stuff. And so I took a big brave step that day, which felt like first steps on the moon. But I went over to these paddlers and I was like, look, I'm really keen. And this was probably age 16 and a half or something, and said, look, I'm really keen to run this. I think I'm up to it. Will you support me? And they were all about that. And so they gave me some pointers, and they did some safety for me at the bottom and stuff. And I don't know what the other club paddlers thought at this point, because, every time they picked me up and dropped me off at my parents' house, they were pretty much signing on to deliver me home alive at the end of the day.
What did your parents think about all these adventures? Were they just kind of like, go have fun, or were they worried about it?
I'm not sure I even know, to be honest. Like, we're not a family who talk too much on a lot of levels. But I think that I know that some of it made my mother a bit anxious, for sure. And, and I would share stuff with them and I was real and that sort of thing. And I know, my father had been in a lot of dangerous life situations. But I don't know, I guess my take on it is maybe they hope that I had some good decision-making skills. And I know that, they back me now, and at whatever point that started happening, who knows? But, they know that they have trust and faith in my decision-making now and where I'm coming from, and know that I'm strong in this area. But, yeah, no real idea if they just thought I was a wild card who needed to learn some hard lessons and get schooled a little bit. I'm not too sure, kind of thing. And so anyway, on that day there, I basically stepped out of the club culture and became an independent learner a little bit, took charge of my own learning is how I'd sort of see if I reflect back on that moment of time. And so I ran it fine. I've got a horrendous photo of me. I'm on a decent angle, but I've got my arms fully outstretched, please dislocate my shoulder position. And if I'm being perfectly honest, and people would consider this reckless, but I thought there was a good chance I would die that day when I paddled off the waterfall because that was the fear that had been implanted in me from the club.
The club owner fear.
Yeah. But anyway,
awesome.
Got it done, kind of thing. And I think that was a really pivotal point on my learning and progression, starting to track differently. And at some point in there, I joined another kayak club and then started paddling. At one point, started independently paddling off the club as well, which all grew my experience. And during that pathway, sure, had a few more bad experiences. I can remember there's a little section of waterfalls called Blackwater Falls, which is very short. Just got 3 or 4 smaller waterfalls up in Murchison, flows into the Mangles River, very dark water. And on that run, on that particular day, the first drop can have quite a sticky hole in it. And I started getting, again, I was in that same long perception reflex slalom kayak, plastic one, and started getting trashed in this hole both directions and a few cartwheels and stuff, and hadn't been done in a hole quite like that before. And swam out of that and stayed in the hole initially as a swimmer. And the whole, curl into a ball or swim out or do whatever you're going to do. And on that particular day, doing the limp starfish was my go-to. And that seemed to work quite well. But then as soon as I came out of that, there was a tree with quite a few branches right across the river and sort of surfaced in the middle of that and stuff. And so, yeah, again, just little more tidbits of learning and stuff. And so just a lot of experiential learning possibly, but never forgetting this stuff. And I guess just putting it together and carrying it forwards and stuff. And so around about probably 18, I started being in leadership roles on groups. And again, a lot of those people were always older than me, or shared leadership, at least. Another experience, we're paddling a river called the Glenroy, which is on the up in Murchison, up the valley, and it's one of the harder runs in that valley, or in that area. But it's a great training run for the harder rivers off the west coast of the South Island. And on this particular day, there were 4 of us on this group, and one older chap had borrowed a RPM from someone, and two of the guys were out on the bank close to this more difficult rapid. I had run the rapid first. We'd all got out to scout it. I'd run it first, and I was waiting in an eddy down the bottom on the left. And this chap ran the line and mucked it up a little bit. He got washed onto some rocks sideways and then was heading momentarily towards the main drop backwards. And a little triangular rock that we didn't even know was there because you couldn't see it. By him being where he was at, it dewatered this rock a little bit. And the nose of the RPM, to our surprise, bent around this triangular rock and broke his foot inside the kayak. And so the position he was in was basically hanging backwards over a waterfall, fully underwater, apart from just his forearm out of the water. And so, bang, straight away, he's in a drowning position. And so quick action was needed. These guys were 2.5 to 3 meters away from him, trying to flick him a length of rope. And the way that I instantly read that situation is that even if you successfully get that bit of rope into his hand, he's not going to do a dynamic sit-up against that flow of water. And so I left my eddy, paddled over. There was a rock down below him. I think I javelin through, which is my go-to a lot of times for stuff. Practice it on flat water, people. Throwing your paddle successfully towards a bank or towards an eddy is pretty effective. Even as a swimmer, sometimes that'll be my strategy, is throw my paddle ahead of me, swim after it, and be dragging the boat behind me or whatever. But so in this instance, I threw my paddle to try and save my paddle, and I just needed to jump out of my kayak right where I was and kiss my kayak goodbye, because this guy didn't. I wasn't in a place where I could stash my kayak, and this guy didn't have time. So the downside of that action is that my throw bag and my pin kit were in the back of that kayak. So my gear was instantly gone, which is, something you've got to weigh up, obviously. So I started climbing the rock up to him, split second thinking. The only strategy that I could see, which I was fine with, is that I thought getting the line to him was not going to work, and I couldn't get to somewhere where I was going to reach him. And so I decided that the strategy was going to need to be to jump in there with him and essentially give him a bear hug, so that our heads were close together, arms wrapped around him, and rip his spray skirt off and hope and rely that the water current was going to rip us both off, And anyway, again, luckily for me, just before that situation transpired, he came out, kind of thing. And so I jumped in, swam him quite aggressively to the side, because immediately below him at the bottom of this drop was quite a sticky hydraulic. And then there's 4 or 5 different slots that are all sieved out. And then there's one line that's clear, kind of thing. And so jumped in, swam him to the side. Again, he was fully conscious, fully cognizant, all of that, pretty stoked to be alive. His version of the story, and I'm not sure where I sit with this, but I can possibly see this, is that he also thinks, like, he contributed me with his saving him, whereas I don't see it that way because I didn't. But he had a nose plug on, and so he thinks that if he didn't have the nose plug on, he would have drowned. And possibly he could have, because the position he was in, full force of the current is going straight at his nostrils. And so I don't know, it's been an interesting thing to think about. Do I advocate for paddling nose plugs all the time? No. But as someone
I've always thought about that from the opposite perspective, which was maybe a little bit a fanciful scenario. But if you somehow were in a position where you had to breathe out of your nose because your mouth was trapped somehow,
sure,
that might be the only way to get air. Interesting, possibly, though, to hear the opposite possible situation.
Yeah. Who knows? Like my personal situation, like I've always been a bit of a mouth breather. And so I have never really sort of valued my nose in some ways. But then 3 or 4 years ago, I've had to get my ears drilled out from surfer's ear. And I also had some nasal surgery. And I've had a 3-year battle with some pretty intense sinus infections. And a younger me would have told me that I was a pussy and to hurry, to get over that and stuff. But like, for anyone who's dealt with sinus infections, they're pretty debilitating things, and it's not a happy time. And I'm still dealing with this and trying to figure out ways to manage it. And I'm definitely having to increasingly wear a nose plug, which I hate. But if I'm going to go to a play spot and do cartwheels and loops or whatever, I have to have that on. And increasingly in my river running, I should have it on, because otherwise I pay the price for days or weeks afterwards, which is just not a happy time. I guess an older me now knows that nose plugs have a place. Like you say, would it hinder you or did it save him on that day? Who knows? So anyway, we got him out, and then his boat's still stuck there. And so I basically said to the other boys, who are like 45-year-old adults who've been paddling 15 years longer than me, let's get your pin kits, let's get into this. Let's set up some mechanical advantage, set up a 3-to-1, and let's get his boat out of there. And so then they did the classic patting their chest, sorry, I've forgotten my wallet type scenario. We don't have pin kits, to which I'm thinking, what the fuck?
You were the responsible 18-year-old here.
Yeah,
huh?
Totally. Yeah, which surprised me. So anyway, we go down the river to find my kayak, which was, dare I say it, a Savage Fury, which is the ultimate easy creek boat style of kayak kind of thing. Interesting design. But anyway, we were running a lot of stuff in those back then. But so anyway, so we find my boat, and it's wrapped. It's got a decent sized log poking into the cockpit of it. And so I have to shimmy out on the log, reach into the back of my boat to pull off my pin kit, to then set up mechanical advantage to retrieve my boat, and then we go upstream and pull his boat off. So we get to the end of the river, and I'm not sure if this is the first time, but I have strong memories of leading a debrief type situation after that day of, basically like, guys, that was a fuck up. We need to talk about this, And I'm a big advocate for debriefing things, and hopefully all of us putting our egos aside and not being too argumentative or pushing back on other people's ideas and trying to take new ideas on, kind of thing, because I think we all can have learning in all situations, where sometimes we don't always hear it the best, sometimes people don't say it the best. And so I basically led a debrief on that situation, basically saying, like, look, firstly, you guys should have pin kits. You've been paddling much longer than me. Why wouldn't you have gear, kind of thing? And secondly, throwing a rope into his hand, I wouldn't have seen as a successful rescue option, kind of thing. And so what I found interesting in that moment there, and talking about the points that they raised, is they were concerned about the hydraulic. And I understand that, because that hole had a fearsome reputation, and probably 60-70% of good kayakers who paddled it back then, when the hole was this particular way, got pounded, and most of them would swim. But as a swimmer, you're going to swim out of it straight away. And so that was, I guess, an insight into their river and river feature awareness, and that their understanding and reading of that situation was quite different to mine, and that I didn't really care about the hydraulic, but I was very focused on those 4 or 5 sieves immediately below it, and they were what was on my radar. It's like, there's no way I wanted to go swimming near any one of those, kind of thing. So yeah, a bit of learning there, but a bit of growth into debriefing situations after they go down. I've certainly been on some serious river situations where people do not want to debrief it. They do not want to talk about it, and they want to pretend it never happened. And I tend to probably never go boating with those people ever again, if that's kind of their outlook of life.
Yeah, that's a bad attitude. That's it's amazing maturity for 18 years old. You were well beyond me at that point.
Possibly, but I'd also say that a lot of people would argue that I was balancing that out with a huge amount of immaturity off the river. It's still probably roll a little bit that way. Yes, well, but I think as well, some of those experiences, like with helping Rolf out on the Turnbull that day, and that experience there, it also made me realize, like, sometimes I'm the only person there, or the only person willing to act. And I'm also reliant on what I have with me, because back then, the general school of thinking and what was being taught was that, if Bob has a sling and Mary has a carabiner and Dave has a prusik, we can build a system and we can save someone. And I've never really subscribed to that, and I don't subscribe to that now. I never have really. And my personal experience has reinforced to me that, I need to have the gear that I need to be able to try and sort a situation out, and to be honest, I've never used mechanical advantage to try and retrieve a person. I've only ever needed to do it on gear, and I feel fortunate for that, because I know how long it can take, and how easy it is for all of us to get rusty if we're not well practiced at that stuff. Yeah. So
that's interesting. I was going to ask you about that. So you do advocate every boater bringing a pin kit, bringing tether, bringing safety gear.
Totally. Yeah. So
do you take it with you anytime you go paddling, or?
Yeah, religiously. And the big thing that when I'm like, I've just helped run a river rescue course here, which is the first one that I've run at that level more formally. And I've got a lot to learn as a teacher. And this experience I just had the other week was quite humbling, because as doing this interview will probably demonstrate I talk too much. But I've got a lot to learn as a teacher, and I'm prepared to learn, and I'm prepared to eat humble pie and take the feedback, because I want to get better, and I want to, I'm passionate about river rescue education, and it's not about me being a hero or presenting myself in some higher, power type of way. It's just about sharing of knowledge so that hopefully other people don't have bad experiences and stuff. And so one thing that I like to talk about is that laziness and complacency is huge, and we might get out at a spot and do some proactive in advance, safety management, which might be standing there with a throw bag, or I like to carry a 4.5, 5 meter flip line quite a bit. And that thing, honestly, is my go-to for you. I use the shit out of that all the time, every day. Or I might just be standing there with my hands free, ready to just grab someone, or I might have planned, right, if someone gets in the shit there, I'm going to want this gear, but I need to jump in there. I need to jump to that rock. I need to swim over to there, climb down that log, and then I can hopefully access where they are or something. And so, you might get out and, particularly on our home runs, we might get out and do safety there when we were younger or starting out, or we saw something bad happen, but then, complacency and laziness can seep in. And after doing it 10 times or 50 times or 100 times or 325 times, we decide, oh, nothing ever happens here. Or other people tell us, nothing ever happens here, Gareth. It's fine. Don't worry about it, and stuff. Whereas I've always tried to walk the line of no, my intuition and my experience and my conviction all tell me that this is a dangerous spot, and that stuff will happen there. And I'll share a story with you in a little bit that'll still blows my mind thinking about it, to be honest. But so, yeah, I want to stand by not being lazy, and that laziness includes not taking my safety gear because it's a drag or it's a pain in the ass or it limits my performance a little bit or something. And with that being said, like I've done a lot of paddling in Colorado. If I was at the play park there, I'm not necessarily going to have my pin kit or my rope in my boat. It's probably going to be in my car. But if there was a nasty tree or a willow tree or some hazard downstream, I may have it with me or closer or something like that, So, yeah, park and play at one single spot, not so much. But
even if you were going to paddle the Royal Gorge or the Numbers or something like that on the Arkansas that's well within your ability, you would still bring that stuff along because something might happen to somebody else or even something.
Every time. And if other people in the group didn't have it, I'd be having a nice conversation with them. And the second time round, they'd be pretty much having the conversation of, this is how I roll. This is my commitment to you. This is what my friends this is what a friend looks like to me. Get on board or find someone else to paddle with, I would rather paddle the run, and I'm not advocating for solo paddling, but I'd rather paddle the run by myself than have it with someone there who's not committed or doesn't put focus or emphasis in river safety, or is just happy to live in a world of naivety kind of thing. We had an interesting experience as a group. I paddle with a great team of people back in New Zealand, and we're a mixed team in the sense that we have a couple of grade 5 boaters. We've got a bunch of people who are grade 3, 4, and we might have a couple of people who are just starting out. And I guess what links and bonds us together is that we're all committed learners, and we're all committed to looking after each other and upskilling. So, we were up paddling a grade 4 type run, and there was a new person to the group. And he asked, and he's not a super experienced paddler, and he asked what safety gear everyone had. And I thought, that's awesome. Here's someone being proactive. He's new to this group. He doesn't know how we roll. He's taking some steps. And so that, that he grew on me straight away because of that. What we found out later on down the river is that because everyone had stuff, he left his stuff in the car. So he had a bit of a fall from grace in the eyes of the person who found that knowledge out, who's a friend of mine, who's a grade 5 paddler. Blair, and also in my own eyes. And so Blair took the initiative and had a bit of a conversation with him about, dude, I'm not going to say anything, but just so you know, if everyone else here knew that, they wouldn't be at all stoked and they probably wouldn't paddle with you again. And his attitude was like, oh, don't be like that, and stuff. And so anyway, and I had a little nudge at it as well later on Messenger or Facebook or something of like, dude, happy to boat with you, happy to bring you along and nurture your growth and stuff. But as Blair said to you, this is how we roll, and rolling in any other way, you're not a welcome part of this group, kind of thing. The thing I like about this group, and I don't know, I'm not the only person driving this, but I've had a hand in influencing it, is that as we roll down any river on any day, we will build in a little bit of rivercraft or river practice it might be something silly. It might be a challenge if, Kim, do you think you can swim to that rock there? Like it's a bit of a tricky one. Could you make that swim? And so you might try it and miss it or make it or something. And the next moment someone else is like, oh, I want to see if I can do that now. And it's not a competitive ego thing. It's more just it's a building of knowledge and awareness. So we might be doing something like that, or we might set up a tension zip line and zoom everyone across the river, or do some boat rescues or whatever, and just practice some stuff, just stay current, And to be honest, like, I'm not really that nerdy with stuff, I don't think, anyway, in my mind. And I like to do stuff informally and on the fly, and make it creative and fun and have some laughs and take the piss and stuff and all of that as we do it, and nurture and help people as well. And so doing this stuff in the river, to me, is just as fun as going kayaking or going rafting or going pack rafting. So
I like that. I have a long-time paddling partner who's kind of talked about as he's gotten older, he's had to back off a little bit on, how difficult the runs there, yes, that he does. And he says a little bit tongue in cheek, but, he's like, yes, I kind of love it when there's a swimmer or some kind of rescue situation, because it amps up the run, and makes it more fun. You have to problem solve. You have to figure out how to rescue gear. He enjoys it. Yeah. And it's like, why not just artificially do that and set up some good practice scenarios as you're going down? I love that idea.
And I've sort of found for me, like, as my, when I was like cutting my teeth and paddling and trying to find my way, like I was getting quite a bit of pushback from some senior paddling people in my younger days who didn't approve of things. And I look at that like, well, you didn't actually know how we operated on the river. And I'd actually argue that we operated at a higher level of safety than what they would even comprehend in their own paddling. But they just judged us from antics at the pub and off the river and stuff, and just thought that we were crazy hooligans with the death wish. But like, I sort of feel that like my experience has taught me that the more time I can spend swimming rapids, throwing throwbags, pulling people, rescuing boats, whatever, the more I can sort of practice that stuff and get better at that, the stronger I am in a position to really effectively help people. And so, trying to pass those skills down and share that knowledge and so forth. And I've kind of coined this phrase, which I teach from a little bit, of as far as this concept of a leader paddler. And so rather than worshipping the world's best, because I had some opportunities to go paddling a few times with people who were considered the world's best at that period of time on some pretty hard rivers that were pushing my comfort zone, and I wasn't that psyched on it, to be honest. And one crew, like this river was pushing my mental and physical abilities. The upper Whitcombe, shortly after it had been done, for the first time in New Zealand. We were probably the second or third descent on it or something. And the only way that I could get the safety that I wanted on that run was to jump out, scout the rapids really, really quickly, and then hand my throwbag to someone and say, will you stand here for me? Because otherwise, normally I'd be like, with that difficulty of river, with the people I was paddling with and being like probably I'd describe myself the second weakest in that group. And I would normally be quite happy to watch 4 or 5 people run it and see the outcome and see the lines and all of that. But I learned quite quickly as how this group was rolling down the river that if that was the case, people weren't getting out to do proactive, let's say in advance safety. That's not how they rolled. And to the extent that one of the best in the group wouldn't even tell the group, we'd all be looking at something, and the next moment you turn around and here he is, and he started running the action, and he hadn't even told anyone he was going to run it. And this was a guy who was world's best, up on that level. And so that was a bit of an eye opener for me. And normally, like I used to take a month and a half off to go kayaking over this period of time, and this was probably halfway through that. And we had that trip, and I knew that all the other paddling on the coast that was going to be happening was going to be high level stuff, which I wanted to do and I wanted to paddle. But honestly, after that trip, I was just a bit dismayed, and I was like, I'm going to go back to work 3 weeks early because I'm not into this, And the chap who was probably the weakest on that trip that I did, but still a very capable paddler and a lovely guy. And he was the guy I felt the most connected with and had my back. He drowned on the very next river that team went paddling on. And I wasn't there. It's easy for me to pass judgment and stuff, but I would say that a contributing cause of his death was how that group was operating.
Wow.
And that was a really, reinforcing time of learning and, having the conviction to walk away from a group and an environment or a trip or whatever, or if you see if you see the dominoes falling just in the planning stages of something, maybe it's not a winning strategy to be part of that. Maybe it's step out of it, or is there a way to change it and make it better or something? So that was a bit
I wonder how much of that is ego, kind of going back to your theme earlier on. I remember a guy, Leif Anderson, maybe I shouldn't be calling him out on that, but he's a very good paddler, lives out in the Pacific Northwest now, used to live in Colorado.
Yes.
But he was part of that, what was it, the Whitewater Grand Prix? Do you remember that event that they had running for a few years, which was, I thought, an awesome idea. And what they did, I think the one that kind of killed it was when they went to Chile and spent too much money and got in debt, unfortunately. But he said that it was just so loose, people out there paddling, because it's all of these people that just are like, they're there to compete. They think they're the best paddlers in the world. And, people were just, it was kind of the extreme version of what you're talking about there, where everyone was just out paddling ahead on their own, not looking out for each other, not thinking about safety. Yes. Not to dog on any of those people.
No, for sure. And we all go through different stages of our lives, and and just because someone did something once or does it now doesn't mean they used to do it or won't do it. Again, like we're all learning, aren't we? And so I guess part of that, going back to that leader paddler concept for me, is it's like, rather than putting someone up on legendary guru type status and worshipping the shit out of them, I've chosen to never do that. Whereas I've got a huge amount of respect for people as paddlers, but as I've grown, what that looks like to me is like, someone who can run the gnarliest gnar on earth doesn't mean anything to me unless there's still a good dude or woman. Sorry, that sounded terrible, didn't it? A good person, or supporting learning, being there for others, supporting safety, not just there in their own selfish little sphere, and so, because for me, going and paddling a hard river and stepping up and running a hard rapid doesn't spin my wheels, and I guess the way I look at it now, like I'm quite black and white and almost scientific, and like I almost look at things now, and I'm not saying this is the way, maybe it's just my way, but if I have a huge rush of adrenaline, then I was probably delving into that area of pushing beyond my comfort zone and beyond where I could successfully pull something off. like I've got quite a black and white view on adrenaline rushes on some levels. And I'm not saying I don't get them or I'm immune to them or whatever, but whereas, yeah, I find for me, if the adrenaline's kicking in, it's probably because something went wrong or I was rolling the dice too far. Whereas most of the time I am paddling, I want to be paddling within my abilities, pushing them a bit at times, and so generally there isn't that huge adrenaline rush. It's either delivery of what I thought I could deliver, or it's a bit of a screw up and I muck it up, and whether, blew that stroke or shit, I took a swim or whatever. And yeah, there's some learning to get taken out of it, but there isn't that big adrenaline and yahooing and whooping and screaming and stuff, because I've sort of experienced that from someone else recently, to other people on 2 different runs fairly recently. And it always makes me like raise an eyebrow of slight concern as to where that person's at and what they're at and stuff. And so I try and sort of teach and lead this and live towards this model now of us all, rather than us just trying to aspire to be the best single kayaker that we can, who can just run the NAR, of like, let's try and grow towards this model where we have the strengths and the attributes and the abilities and the equipment of a leader paddler. So someone who's very, very strong in their own right and can paddle staunch water, but is also there to support others and nurture others, and grow their learning and keep everyone safe, because to me, it all comes back to the team. And if the teamwork isn't there on a day, I haven't had a good day. I might go out and run some staunch grade 5, and think I'm the hero or something like that. But if people haven't been looking after each other or looking after me on the river or something, like I often get on a run and, you might advocate to do Taylor and Charlie. And I've been on runs where I've gone down for half a kilometre or a kilometre of whitewater and no one has turned around once, because I am watching and analysing that the entire time, And so if that happens, it's like, okay, fuck you. I'm now at the front of the group. I'll have 5 or 6 or 10 people or whatever the group size now behind me, because it's like I'm doing that role, which is a role that comes with sacrifices and commitments. But if you're not giving back to me by just keeping a casual eye on me, I'm not into this and stuff. And so it's quite interesting.
That's a pet peeve of mine as well.
Sure. Yeah. And so what I've started playing around with recently is instead of like deciding on a run, like, right, Kevin, you're the leader, I'm the Taily and Charlie, Jim, you're a bit weaker, you're going to be in the middle of the group, the rest of you are just going to float around or whatever. What I'll talk about now is the duties and responsibilities that go with that role. And so like, let's say the leader, for example. So the leader is setting the pace. Maybe they've been the trip organizer as well as pulling it all together. They are maybe choosing the right eddies for the whole team, because maybe it needs to be an eddy that's big enough for all of us to fit in, or maybe it's an eddy that a weaker person can easily get or something like that, or maybe it's an eddy where they can keep an eye on the rest of the group behind them or something like that. So there's a whole bunch of roles of the leader, and let's say the Taily and Charlie, they're making sure that they're the last person. They're making sure that hopefully they can see everyone in front of them. If the leader or the front of the group's getting too far ahead, they're signaling, slow down, dudes, or stop, or whatever. They're keeping the group together, as the leader is as well. But other really important roles, and number 2 for me is huge, the person behind the leader. And so, because I did a lot of paddling in the States where I was with the wrong crew, and an older, wiser me would have got on a plane and left that environment. But as a young man, I put up with it. And I was getting hung out to dry. Like we were putting on runs like Bald Rock Canyon on the Middle Feather at 1 p.m. Yeah. No one had paddled the river before, and I'd lead the whole river. And I was not getting backed up. So none of that situation was a winner. Like the 2 Kiwis, we were sleeping in the dirt, so we were awake at 6 a.m., bright sunshine, whereas the chap who had the vehicle, he had tinted windows, and he'd stay in his van till 10 o'clock, and then they'd go think about trying to find some hillbilly to help us with the shuttle. And so by the time they got back and it was time to put on, it's 1 o'clock. And, and so that particular run springs to mind because I ended up having a full-blown argument with someone partway down the river because those guys were happy to watch me run 200, 300, 400, 500 feet of continuous rapid, standing out of their boats up the top, waiting to see the outcome. And if I'd got in the shit, I would have been screwed and stuff. Whereas the way I like to talk about number two now is that number two is there to back up number one, the leader. And so if the leader goes, if we're running, we might have a group, but we might have a buddy system within that group possibly. And so number two's job is to roll down behind number one and Eddie hop down with them, or be, if you're blue angeling or truck and trailer or whatever, not that I'm totally into that style, but, you're working with that front person to keep an eye on them, and if they're if they're getting ready to pull out to run the rapid, and if you're in that position, you're not up to running that rapid because you haven't finished looking at it, or your confidence isn't there or whatever, then in my mind, it's your job to speak up and to say, and to get them to stop and say, hey, dude, sorry, I'm not up to this. Can someone else go down after you, or whatever needs to happen? And likewise, weaker people in the group, often, the best place for them is in the middle of that group, but monitoring them, not forgetting them, and those sorts of things. And so the way I teach this now is that here are the duties and the responsibilities of these roles. So if you find yourself, or you choose to go past the leader and now be in the front, you've assumed the mantle of responsibility potentially. So don't go past the leader unless you're willing to do those jobs and roles and stuff. And so that it doesn't necessarily have to be a fixed Bob's the leader, Jim's at the back, whatever. The roles might change, but here are other roles. Because again, I think a lot of beginner or intermediate paddlers don't even know the roles or understand the responsibilities that a better paddler might be providing to them. And so I think by having these conversations, talking about them, and growing teams of people, it's all good education for trying to set people on the pathway. And rather than people or an intermediate paddler hanging out in the middle of the group going, well, I'm just a beginner or just an intermediate, if they can start looking at it, going like, right, okay, I can see that Gareth's just grabbed that Eddie strategically there so he can protect us here. And they can start thinking about it and seeing it, and they can start contributing. Like my kids started paddling from a young age. They come on trips and they would be carrying a throw bag. Can they throw a throw bag at age 6? Hell no. But if all the other throw bags get exhausted, they might have enough nous to go, oh, mister, there's a throw bag in my boat, or here's my throw bag, throw this one. And that was what they could contribute, and it's interesting. The last few years, like I've taken a bit of an alternative pathway with my kids in learning, and I deliberately didn't teach them to roll. Still kind of haven't a little bit, even though they're 13 and 15 now. Son's kind of getting it a bit. Part of that's been a distance of living over 2 countries as well, but I've taught my kids to become phenomenal river swimmers, and we'll go and do river swimming. And at like age 10, they can kick the ass of any adult there pretty much. And because I don't really care whether they turn into kayakers or not, kayaking is and possibly an opportunity for us to spend some time together and a pathway for them to learn about learning. But it's more like whether they go to the beach with their friends or if they go hiking in the mountains and they have to cross a river or whatever, like I want them to have strong river skills. And so from age 6 months to age 8 or 9, we were literally at the swimming pool once a week, every weekend kind of thing. Like I've done that time. We've been in the river, we've been in the surf, like I've helped them grow their confidence in that area. And I'm proud of that, and I'm stoked for them to have those strengths and stuff. I still go. I've been doing some training with the surf lifesaving here in New Zealand more recently, and what I've learned, because I'm not a sprinter on land or anything like that, but what I've figured out is that sprinting in the river is largely actually sprint swimming and you're often swimming short distances at high speed, maybe on one breath, to go and save someone.
Makes sense, yeah.
And so I'm quite good in that arena, but I go and train with surf lifesaving, and they're like, "Oh, just go and do your 400 meter warm up," and my jaw drops because I'm like, "What?" And I, that's really hard work for me, and it's beating me down. And the last time I went and did it, I was probably like 1.5 kilometers into the swim, and I'm thinking, I might drown in the swimming pool right now because I was just and I'm not that great at my freestyle breathing and stuff. But in that environment, they're actually giving us pointers and teaching us to swim. So part of river rescue training now, like I'm telling lots of adults, go and get over that hurdle, give something up, let go of your ego and your fears, and go and get some swimming lessons from someone who's got capable skills, whether that's in a swimming pool with a swim instructor or going to your local river and leaning on whoever's a really good river swimmer to give you some good skills to upskill you, kind of thing.
That's an often overlooked skill. I think you're right. I mean,
totally. Yeah. And like all of I've got no qualms saying, and I don't think of myself as a hero, but I've got no qualms saying that I've saved 5 or 6 people's lives. And most of those saves have either been from just standing in the right spot, and I've done nothing heroic other than just reach down into the sieve that they were just about to flush into and pull them up and just go, you get to live today, But again, that all comes down to like lazy and complacency, recognizing the hazard and bothering to get out of my boat, walk down there and stand there. And then the other part of it has been aggressive river swims to go and get people. An example of that, I won't name the name, but he was a mentor of Rolf's, ironically. And so this chap came to New Zealand, and because he was a mentor of Rolf's, and Rolf had given me his blessing of where this dude was at with his paddling. We went and did a harder run. And on this run, we flew in up the upper Hokitika, and the first rapid of the day had an undercut rock that was a little bit nasty in the centre of the river. And so I said to the others, I'm happy to swim out to behind that rock, and I'll get up there and I'll do some safety for you guys, So I'm standing in the right spot, ready to go, kind of thing. So I did that. They ran it fine, headed on down short distance and grabbed another eddy. And they did ask me, do you want us to swap? And I was like, nah, I'm fine paddling this without the safety there. And so I ran that part fine. And as I'm coming down towards the eddy where they had taken out, or were taking out, so I should say, I'll refer to him as the American chap, which is not a slag on Americans. It's just because he was American, and I don't want to say his name just out of respect.
I think I know who the American chap is, but that's okay. We can keep him anonymous.
Yeah. So anyway, so he was he was already walking down the river, down the bank to go and scout the next rapid, which is fine. Didn't have a problem with that. But the Kiwi chap had his back to me getting out of his boat. And so straight away, a little debrief situation, because I knew this Kiwi chap. I'd known him through the university club. This was probably the hardest river he'd done, but I kind of had a feeling that he was probably ready to be there. And he's a really good dude with his head switched on. And so my feedback started with, Graham, can I just give you a little bit of feedback? Take it or leave it, which in Gareth speak means hear me now, otherwise we'll never paddle again, ever again. And so it's basically like, dude, I just did that safety for you guys up there. Your job now at this point when I'm coming down, when I'm running it, is to just at least be sitting in the eddy, eyes on me. You don't have to be out of your boat, throw bag or anything like that, but your job is to watch me until I make this eddy. And this is really basic paddle etiquette, and I need you to hear me on this right now. And so he took that on board, super open, and that was awesome. So, no problem, no weirdness, carry on our trip. And as the trip progressed, the American chap was kind of putting himself in his own group of one. There were 3 of us on the river, and we weren't trying to isolate him or exclude him. It was just the way that he rolled down the river was not how I would choose to roll down a river, particularly a river I didn't know. In a foreign country and all of that sort of thing. And so we got down to the hardest rapid, which is called Viagra Falls, and it's a series of moves to make, and there's a sieve partway down it, and then there's a point where you could stop. After you go over the main drop, you could stop and you could get out of your boat. And so we had chosen to do that because I pointed out to them that the very next move, which is just a banking turn, virtually grade 2, has this horrendous sieve. And this is a sieve that I'd paddled past several times and kind of gone like, oh, that doesn't look too nice. And then the next time I'd be like, oh, I should maybe check that out. And then I'd maybe checked it out once and then maybe forgotten about it once and all that sort of thing. But then I got to a point where I'd finally implanted on my brain, that sieve's really nasty. It deserves a lot of respect kind of thing. And so for however many trips, every time I'd either been walking that part of the rapid or making sure that we had safety, which was just someone standing there ready to grab and push someone out in their boat or grab someone as a swimmer or an entrapped person or whatever and stabilize them. And so on this particular day, I ran the first part of that rapid, eddied out, got out of my boat, and we made a plan that American chap was going to come down and grab that same eddy. And so he came down and we were further situated downstream. There was a dude, Graham was doing safety for him closer to that exit point. But then the next moment, he decided he was going to run the next part of this. And so he pulled out, easy move, blew it, and I think it's in some sort of pre-on boat or something, can't remember what it was, big creek boat anyway, but dropped into the sieve vertically and instantaneously his big orange boat rocketed out of the sieve, and the lowest part of that boat, the nose end of the boat, cleared the water by 3 to 4 feet. Like I've never seen anything like it.
What?
Like it was like it was getting launched to space, but without him.
Oh, wow.
And so straight away it's like, oh shit, no sign of him. I know how bad this is. Graham's about 100 feet upstream of me and microseconds are passing. And I'm thinking like, right, run up to where Graham is, grab my boat, paddle what the American chaps just paddled, try not to go on the sieve myself, try and stop somewhere, try and rescue him. Average kind of solution because I might end up in the sieve as well. Option B, portage my boat up, paddle across the river, run down. That's going to take 7 or 8 minutes. That's not a winner and stuff. And then right in front of me in the middle of the river, there was a hydraulic with decent backwash on it, but nothing to be concerned about, but potentially a tool which I could use. But below that, in a very short distance below, was a grade 5 rapid that you may not survive as a swimmer, and I potentially wasn't even going to paddle in my kayak. And so I used to carry my pin kit. I had a pretty awesome waist, like a bum bag type dry bag that carried my pin kit, and I've had my throw bag there as well. And so when I was disconnecting that stuff, because I'd made my plan of attack, and as I was disconnecting this, I look up at Graham, and he was obviously reading my body language, and he was shaking his head back and forth like, don't do that. Anyway, I was committed, jumped in, some aggressive strokes, used the backwash of that sticky hydraulic to my advantage, and then managed to get to the ledge that I needed to get to with my fingertips, and then pendulumed in behind that rock kind of thing, ran round, got to old mate, and he was bracing his arms sideways so that his elbows were up on this rock ledge, either side of the sieve. Water's fully over his head, but he's breathing at this stage. But the moment he had lost the strength, he would have been dead. So pull him out of there. And the first, again, nothing heroic at that point, just grab him. But the swim was definitely in my red zone of things that I'd be willing to do. And I'm glad I pulled it off, because I don't like the idea of if I had gone off down that rapid. But the first thing he said to me is, how did you get here so quickly? And I was like, I swam across there. And his response was, I wouldn't do that. And so I think to myself, that's good to know. So anyway, the rest of the trip was about getting ourselves down this river through some challenging gorges and stuff, keeping our noses clean, staying out of trouble, basically. And anyway, so that night, he and his travelling companion came around to my house. I was cooking dinner, and the paddling boys are sitting on the couch or whatever, and he gave me a copy of a book which he had written. And it's a lovely, lovely book. And I hope if he ever hears this, he won't take any of this like it's an insult or it's derogatory or not. But I think there's powerful learning here for people potentially. And so he gave me this book, and there was an inscription in it, and shook his hand and all of that, thanks, gratitude, blah, blah. He went on his way, and then the boys kept flicking through the book, and an envelope fell out. And they're like, oh, Gareth, you better look at this. And so there's thousands of dollars of money in this envelope.
Whoa.
And as probably, I don't know what I was, 20, 21 or something. Like, my mates didn't understand that, maybe still don't. But I swooped that envelope up, went and jumped in my car and went downtown to try and find this chap, and did find him. And basically, like, my take on that is I felt that I understand that he was grateful and wanted to show his gratitude, but I felt that by paying me money, he could potentially be buying out of the experience and buying out of the learning, because I felt that by having a debt of gratitude towards me, because I did risk my life that day, and that's the most I've probably ever risked my life for anyone. By having a debt of gratitude to me, he owed me, and what he owed me was to try and carry some of the learnings from that day forwards, hopefully. And so we had a conversation about that, and I was pretty much like, I don't want your money, dude. And he was pretty much like, well, give it to a charity then. I was like, okay. But we had a bit of a conversation about how that day went and how we weren't trying to exclude him, but some of the things that he was doing potentially led to him getting in that situation, and that I would like him to hopefully take some of that learning forward, kind of thing. And I don't know if I should, this is closer to your area of home, but there was a drowning on the,
Upper South Boulder Creek.
Yeah. And my understanding of that situation is that they were doing laps of that hole or that rapid or whatever, and not really doing it necessarily in a buddy system within that group, but just a bit of a free-for-all of just people running it. And their mate ended up swimming and drowning in that hole, whilst people still had paddled past him while he was in there without knowing he was in there. Is that kind of right? Or is there?
I'd heard it a little differently.
Okay.
That the person who ended up drowning in it had typically people just walk it.
Sure.
And for whatever reason that day, he just was feeling good, and just kind of, as people were taking out to walk it, he just kind of gave a thumbs up and paddled straight down. And then by the time they came up on him, they found that he was in this sieve.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And so, like that kind of like, and obviously, the version of what I heard or whatever it's morphed into in my mind since then was a little bit different. But it disheartened me slightly, because I kind of felt like, and admittedly, like, that responsibility doesn't necessarily sit with the person that I was paddling with this day. It maybe sits with the person who chose to paddle off without waiting for safety or whatever. Who knows, But it's just I guess something that really frustrates me is when you hear about experiences when you just think that they could have been easily avoided. And I kind of felt like that was potentially one of them. We had another experience on the Hokitika River, but on the easier section of it, which was a club group, and they were doing laps off just this one little drop, which is not a big deal. And it's literally 2 feet high, if that. Not that much of a hydraulic in it. Like, it's kind of like no big deal, but a good place to learn to boof. And one of their team, again, it was a free-for-all. They weren't running it in any form of a buddy system or one person overseeing it all, which I understand sounds a bit nerdy to a lot of boaters. But when you hear about this unnecessary death, it's like, well, is it suddenly nerdy? And so anyway, this chap got vertically pinned under the water in the drop, and no one knew. And people are still lapping this particular drop with him still in there without knowing it.
What?
And then they all finally decided, like, right, time to go. They're like, where's Rod? And unfortunately, Rod died that day. And a few factors might have led to that, to him possibly not being in the best boat, and often his life jacket wasn't the very best. And so, but yeah, just unnecessary drownings just kind of piss me off, like they're just, why do we need them,
That's all sobering, because I think we've all been, like, anyone that's paddled for any length of time has been in a situation at one point where there with a group, and you're not feeling the vibe of how the river's being run, and people are, like you said, people get dispersed into different groups. People aren't paying attention to each other, and I think those become awkward situations. And oftentimes you just kind of ride it out, and then try to adjust your group next time. But but yeah, when when things work out fine, you can kind of laugh it off or ignore it. But when it leads to tragedy, then that's a whole other thing to deal with, right, for the rest of your life.
Rolf actually links to this story. This was just before he flew home from New Zealand. On one trip, we were paddling the Upper Whitcombe, which is very, very staunch 2-day run, and there was a heavy rain warning coming. And Rolf and I had been paddling the second part of this river quite a lot, and we've been doing it in some different flows, and we've done the whole section, the 2-day section, in a day, and that we knew it pretty well. And on this particular trip, heavy rain warning coming, which means a lot in the environment we live in. Like, that's meters and meters of rain. And so one friend chose not to come because he thought it was a dumb call, whereas we were looking at this weather pattern thinking, like, right, well, the river's lower at the moment. We want less water for the upper day, but if we get the window right, we can have a little bit more water on the second day and we can have a good time. However, that's not what panned out. We did the first day, and then that night we were in the hut, and the river started raining, and a rescue chopper came in, and it landed down on the lower flats, river flats. And so I went running down, and I was like, "Are you looking for us?" And he was like, "No." And so some trampers or hikers, we call it tramping in New Zealand, so some hikers who were very well equipped with ropes and crampons and ice axes and all that stuff, who'd done a higher mountain pass, had come over into the headwaters of this river, travelled on down, hit by this rain, rivers coming up, and they made a mistake, which is all too common in New Zealand, which is super unfortunate. And so they're sitting in the rain, and the hut's on the other side of this creek, which was fast becoming a river in itself. And so they decided that they should try and get to the hut on the other side of the river. And because they had this gear, they tried to find a point where they could abseil off a cliff, an overhanging cliff that got them further across the river. And so the first person who went was a woman, and she basically spent 20 odd minutes hanging off the rope in this cold, flooded creek, and got a fair amount of her clothes ripped off her by the force of the current. Luckily didn't die, but was definitely on her way to having hypothermia. And so this chopper had gone in to look for them. And so, it's a situation where, like, I've gone, and I was part of a whitewater search and rescue team for a number of years, and we had another situation one day where we had to go and look for a woman, and same thing, hiking, hut was on the other side of the river. She and her partner tried to cross it. She got swept away and drowned, kind of thing. So just so unfortunate, I think. Sorry, I got off track there. Getting back to our trip. So we paddled the first day of this run, got to the hut, river came up, put on the next day. Normally when we fly in to do the one day, you land on this big, giant gravel island. And the rocks are like meters and meters out of the river. Whereas on this day, we put in around the corner in the side creek, and it was kind of muddy brown. And the two of us who knew it really well looked at each other and were kind of like, this could be quite big, possibly not quite right. And so we paddle around the corner, and this giant gravel island, which is, the size of 10 or 15 houses, is all gone and underwater. And so we know straight away, like, this is no go. And so we, boats in the bush, start hiking, because Rolf and his friend needed to get to the airport the next day. So we had a bit of pressure on us, and sometimes that pressure in itself can lead to quite bad decision making.
Sure.
And so we decided we're going to leave the boats here, we're going to exit the valley, and we'll fly back in and paddle the boats out later, or retrieve the boats, whatever, get the boys to the helicopter so they can fly back to the States. Get the boys to the airport. And so we cruise on down the river valley, and at one point we cross quite a flooded creek, and it has a swing bridge, and that bridge is anchored to a giant boulder. And just crossing that swing bridge, I was pretty nervous with the flow of water that was coming down the side creek underneath it. Like it was like, if this bridge collapses or we fall in right now, which is not an outcome, but it's like you die very quickly. Like things were huge. The main river itself had features where it had sort of 4, 5 meter, 6 meter high hydraulics and waves and stuff. Like it was just insane.
Incredible.
Being on the track, even though we're like 150 feet above the river, I was still terrified of like, what if I tripped and rolled down here and ended up in there? And you'd almost want to pull a handgun out and eat a bullet rather than go down as a swimmer type of deal. Like it was
Take
bad.
The cyanide pill.
So we got down to a creek, which was becoming a river, and the hut was on the other side, and our pathway for getting out of that valley was on the other side. And we started umming and ahhing about some options, and we were probably a couple of 100 feet above the main river. And the confluence of this creek with the main river, the eddy line convergence was probably 150, 200 feet long, And so like looking at that, it's like, if we screw this up and if we end up in the main river, you're going to be underwater for probably most of that length, and you're probably going to drown. So you can't screw this up if we choose to take the swim option. And I was by far the most experienced swimmer there, and I wasn't happy about the situation, but we were still weighing it up. And so we walked upstream to try and find somewhere, just like this other crew. We tried to find a point where it was easier to cross, or if there was a tree or a cliff or something that would give us some advantage. And we weren't finding that option. So we ended up down at the same spot. And probably half the crew wanted to go for the swim option. And so I basically decided no. And how that looked was in that moment there. And I haven't had to really do this to people before, and I'm not a fighter, but I was pretty much like, I'm the best swimmer here. You all know it. And no one's swimming this river today. And we are going to trade punches. You're going to fight me to get through me, get in this river. This is how seriously I feel about this right now. Like we're not fucking doing this.
That's one way to do it.
Yeah, it is one way to do it. Yeah. And so anyway, people accepted that. And so we were like, right, let's retreat back up past our boats to the hut that we stayed in the night before. And so we got back to this flooded creek. And the boulder that the swing bridge was anchored to, there was now suddenly quite a decent flow of water coming past the other side of that. So we had to send the first swimmer across on a rope. Not horrendously gnarly, but if it was too much worse, we wouldn't have been able to do it, and it would have been dumb to try, kind of thing. But anyway, so we got a swimmer across with a rope, and we were able to get the rest of the team across, went to our hut, and I got my order out of sequence earlier. So it was that night that the rescue chopper arrived. And so I went down there thinking, you must be looking for us. And he was like, no. And I was like, well, can you come back and get us? And he was like, no, because you haven't declared an emergency. It's like, well, can I declare an emergency? He's like, do you have an emergency? I was like, no, but 2 boys need to get to the airport. He's like, well, this is going to cost you $3,000 or whatever. And I was like, well, no. So anyway, it was agreed. Can you get home? When you get home, can you call our usual chopper pilot and tell him to come and get us in the morning because we don't want to be here anymore? And he was like, yeah, that's right. And I was like, and can you tell him to call my wife so she doesn't have a freak out? So anyway, that was the plan of action. And so sure enough, like something out of Apocalypse Now with the Ride of the Valkyries playing, our usual pilot flew in the next morning and flew us all out. And my partner had taken the initiative to pack up Rolf's gear and his other gear, mate's gear, and drive it all into town. So it was pretty much like, thanks for the trip, quick hug, there's your gear, see you later, drive to the airport really, really quickly, And so they managed to meet the flight. But in retrospect there, like the learning is missing a flight and losing $3,000 or $6,000 doesn't mean shit compared to someone dying. And it would have been a huge mistake for us to put on and try and swim that creek. Maybe it was a mistake for us to go into that river valley in the first place, potentially. But yeah, like money or a cold night in the bush in the rain don't outweigh someone's life, you know. So there's a lot of value there in some of those experiences, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty ruthless now, to be honest, in the sense that, like, if someone was at a rapid where they really had no business running it and they were a dickhead and whatever was going on, I'd seriously have no qualms kicking their boat into the river and going, oh, sorry, you can't run it now because your boat's gone, you know? Like, just, you know, I've seen some, after 35 years of paddling, I've seen some truly retarded things, and I've got more and more ruthless and probably more and more black and white. And maybe not everyone wants to paddle with me. Maybe not everyone likes my style, but it works for me. It works for the people who choose to go boating with me. And, you know, and it's not just my beliefs kind of thing, like other people do see it this way, I think. I was going to share with you my pathway to having some of the stuff reinforced, and that whole light bulb moments or premonitions or that sort of warning signs of things. And this is some of the most profound stuff. One of these experiences, probably the most profound, almost religious experience of my life, which has certainly shaped me. And the experience dealing with my friend probably shaped me even more than the experience of myself. But just, I don't know, interesting stuff that I'll just put out there, and then probably after that I should shut up. But so I was paddling a river called the Perth, 19 years old. There were 40 people on the river that day, in different groups. It was at a time in New Zealand paddling where New Zealand was really on the world stage of like a destination to go boating kind of thing. And by having
what period was this? What year?
Late 90s, I guess. I'm not very good on dates, but yeah, for me, I think I left high school at 94 at 17, so maybe it was 96, 97, somewhere in that zone. So I was paddling with a group of 5 people. A female paddler had decided not to come with us that day, so she was waiting around in the car park. Her name was Simone, but she was a very good boater. And I was at a stage of my paddling where I was sharing the leadership responsibility of this group. And so, you know, I had business being on that river. I wasn't out of my depth. Still had more to learn, always had more to learn. And so we flew in, and we were the last group, I believe. And so rolling on down, and we get to the first real rapid of the day somewhat. And my mate named Matt grabbed an eddy on the left above this rapid, which appeared to look like a 5 or 6 foot drop. And it looked pretty straightforward, to be honest. And so by me grabbing the eddy next to him, I was essentially blocking him in. And we, you know, both looked at it and was kind of like, oh, yeah, fine, no worries. And I was kind of like, shall I go? Which was the better option because I was blocking him in a little bit. Everyone else was eddied out a little bit higher up, you know, like we had good team working, not on top of each other too much and stuff. And the way I read this rapid was that it was 4 or 5 foot, whatever drop, and I could see almost calm green water disappearing around the corner kind of thing, and not that far below the main drop. And so it's like, oh yeah, this looks pretty chill. I'll happily huck myself off this without knowing all the information. Which we've all done as more experienced paddlers and still might do at times. And so I pulled out, hucked myself, and the next moment I'm getting obliterated and lots of cartwheels unintentionally. And I'm not sure if I was in the initial drop itself, or what we couldn't see is that the main volume of river was flowing quite quickly down into, so it's probably maybe 20 feet from the drop to the big rock or bluff or whatever you kind of want to call it at the bottom. And then there was a really fast recirculating eddy, and the bluffy, rocky thing at the bottom had a decent sized buffer wave on it that was a couple of feet high. And so I suspect I was getting cartwheeled down in that bottom buffer pocket. And I swam pretty quickly. And again, like a question like, did I get out too soon? Am I a wimp, or, you know, like, do I need to harden up, or whatever's going on there kind of thing. Anyway, so swimming around in this circular or elliptical type loop, basically, that's maybe 20 feet long and maybe 30 feet long, maybe 18, 20 feet wide kind of thing. So it's basically just a giant recirculating eddy that's traveling pretty fast, buffer wave at one end, and a vertical drop and hydraulic at the upstream end kind of thing. And so big rock wall on the river left side with no holes, nothing to grab or anything like that. So I'm going around this thing, and straight away I know this is bad. Go around it several times, and each time that I'm up at the waterfall at the original drop end, I can stand up, but I'm underwater and I'm standing on something, and it's a little bit calmish. And so I'm trying to jump to the right, where I thought the green water was disappearing around the corner. So I'm thinking jumping to the right is safety kind of thing. So going around this thing, and at each time at the halfway points, I can get a breath of air, but pretty panicked, bit concerned. After a couple more loops, start thinking this could be it, which was probably the fourth or fifth time in my life before I was 19 through paddling that I'd thought that. Remember thinking sorry to the girlfriend. And the last time I went round, I didn't get any air. And so when I ended up back at the at the vertical drop end, I was somewhere fractionally different, underwater fully, but hadn't got air on that loop. And obviously, pretty pumped out through adrenaline and trying to swim hard and all that sort of stuff. Something was a little bit different. And so there's rock underneath me. And so I sort of slightly tentatively put my arms out to either side, and I could feel rock on either side of me. And so very tentatively, I reached above me to test that one, and sure enough, and there's rock there as well. And so I basically stuffed somewhere fully underwater. And
that's freaky.
Yeah, it was pretty freaky. But what was interesting is that in that moment, up until that moment, I was freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, am I going to die right now? Sorry to my girlfriend Sonia and all this sort of stuff. But in that moment there, I had crystal clear clarity, and the fear went away. And the clarity was, well, that's that then. And I was 200% clear on the fact that I was dead or about to die, that no other option kind of thing. And again, as I said to you earlier, did I give up too soon? Did I not fight hard enough? Who knows, So I consciously breathed in, and that's the last thing I remember at that point of time. And so meanwhile, what I didn't know is that my friends, in a panic, like shit's going down, got out of their boat. Matt got out of his boat from the eddy because he'd seen bad things start happening, the tail and nose of my boat flashing through the air, so I was getting cartwheeled and whatever. And then the other boys came down. One had to paddle across from the other side of the river and stuff, got out, had a look at where I was or had been, couldn't see me there, went further downstream, checking out, could see current flowing under boulders and rocks and stuff, and checking other spots and stuff, and supposedly went further downstream, and then, kind of checking it out, basically. And supposedly Matt, all these stories are slightly different, which I guess you often get in a panic type situation and adrenaline rushing and all those sorts of things.
For sure.
And supposedly Matt had sat down and taken his helmet off and was in tears because he thought I was dead. So anyway, the next thing in my little world, something in my brain was telling me, it's calm. Stick your head up and breathe. And that little record player or light bulb or force or voice or whatever you want to call it, repeated that 2 or 3 times. It's calm. Stick your head up and breathe. And so I was like, okay. And and suddenly I'm breathing, my head's above water. And I didn't really know where I was at first, and I was quite disorientated. And I was basically in a pool of water, surrounded by rock on all sides. And there was a big tree coming down into this pool, but there wasn't really any flow or any concern of flow. And so my paddle's over there by the tree. So naturally, as any kayaker, I prioritise that. And so over there, grab my paddle and then holding onto this log and climb up that a little bit. And and I'm like totally out of it, like not knowing where I am and what the hell's going on and that sort of thing. And then the next moment, climbed up the tree probably a little bit more and yelled out, I'm here, and just hanging out, just trying to like get my shit together, basically, not knowing what's going on. But being a little bit surprised, why are my friends so far away? Like that was the one thing I remember thinking is like, why is it taking so long to get here right now? Because that was just a split second. That was an instant, and Matt was in that eddy when I left, and he should be really close. And
Really?
so I start looking at the river and the rapids, and I can't put together where I am or what's gone on or what's happened, because I'm looking upstream at the rapid above me on the main river. Because where I am, I should say, the pool of water that I was in was separated from the river by about 25 feet. So dry, rocky riverbed between my little pool or eddy, if you want to call it, and any other water source. And the other mysterious thing is I'm upstream geographically. Well, I don't realize this at first, but when I put it together, I'm like, But so I end up upstream geographically of the original drop that I ran.
No way.
Out to the side, but upstream, which is a little bit weird, and so my mind's like, how does this work, and so obviously I'm at a lower elevation, but geographically I'm upstream, and because for the longest time I'm looking at the rapid above me going like, no, that's not the one I just ran when it went wrong, and so where am I? Did I swim all of that and stuff? And then it's only then that I turn and look downstream, and then I'm like, oh, that's the one I ran, so all that's a little bit weird. Anyway, mates turn up, pull me out, pats on the back and all of that, and and my boat's still going around on this thing. I was paddling a Piranha Acrobat 270, which was my dream boat of the time. Really good boat. Not necessarily a creek boat, but I'd still happily paddle that sort of boat on that sort of water these days if that was my one boat, and I could paddle it well. And so my boat's going round and round in this recirculating eddy that I swam in, and one of the paddlers, Steve, is quite tall. He wanted us to hold him by the ankles and dangle him over this thing to try and reach the boat. And I wasn't really in the frame of mind to do that myself, so I was kind of the attitude, it's just a kayak. Who cares? Fuck it, And anyway, the next second, the river gobbled the boat and shoved it under a sieve anyway, and so decision made, boat's gone, that's that, So in my friend's defense, they were pretty much observing me on top of my game and on top of my shit, in the sense that I wasn't a squawking, crying, freaking out mess out of this whole situation. I was still strong and appearing to be clear and calm and all of that, And so they were pretty much like, little discussion, and then it's like, right, here's a tiny chocolate bar, here's someone's sandals, because I'd lost my sandals at Tevas or whatever in the boat, however I used to roll back then. Here's some sandals. If you run out of here, you should get out of here today. Because we'd flown in by helicopter, probably a 12 or 14-minute flight. And they were like, if you run out of here, you should get out of here today. And I was like, sweet, all good, have a good run, be safe, catch you later, and took off with my paddle. And I got literally minutes down the track and had time to process some of what had happened, and started on a bit of a downhill slide, you might say. And for the next 8.5 to 9 hours, I was a space cadet running out of this valley, and I was falling off stuff, fell in a little puddle or creek at some point and had a little freak out, got lost. At one point found another group. The track emptied you out on this giant beach of giant sand beach. And in New Zealand, like, we have these really good track markers and stuff that are huge, like twice the size of your head, these big giant triangles. And in my state, I couldn't see the next giant triangle at the end of this beach. And so I went and asked these paddlers, like, I need your help, and I need you to come and find me the track and stuff. And so they're like, oh, well, there's that giant orange triangle right there, mate. I'm like, oh, sweet. Okay, catch you later. Carry on running. And further down the road.
You were actually running this whole time.
Oh, yeah, I'm having a run.
You're running like over a marathon. I'm
probably 27 kilometers inland. So fair distance or something, something, yeah, definitely 20 Ks. And so at one point, the Perth River converges with the Whataroa River, and there's a swing bridge there. And so from around about that point mentally, I'd sort of done the maths in my head, like surely they'll have paddled the river by now, and someone will appear around the corner and they'll give me a drink and some food, and they'll pat me on the back and they'll carry the paddle for me, And so I'd built up this expectation of like, oh yeah, this should be happening around this point kind of thing. And anyway, keep going, keep building this expectation, and doesn't quite happen. Know that I'm starting to get closer to the car park kind of thing. And anyway, finally get to the car park, pop round the corner, big long straight. Here's Simone at the end. And I just burst into tears and lose my shit when I see her. And because of that reaction, she thought the worst and thought that all of the rest of them had drowned.
Oh, man.
Because everyone else had gone this day, like probably the last paddler had left probably an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, and so she was the last person in this car park going like, where are these dudes? And then I'm in tears, the big jokester, suddenly a crying little baby. And so she thought the worst. And anyway, so we get to the bottom of that situation and put her mind at ease. And I'm like, I hope they're not dead, because they have been a long time. Anyway, so they rock up, drive back to town and stuff, and talking about shit, that was intense, and how was the rest of your day, and glad that didn't go worse or anything like that. And it was only when we started having a debrief the next day and talking about the time frames, because I didn't realize I'd been unconscious, and in my mind that was a split second. And so, but in their reality, and all these stories are different, from 5 minutes to 6 minutes to 10 minutes to whatever, like who knows what the truth is, And so it was only then that we realized, like, oh shit, I'd been unconscious. You guys really did the wrong thing by letting me run out of that valley by myself. You probably should have taken me to hospital to get me checked out so I didn't have secondary drowning. And then after that day as well, we also found out that 3 other people they were the lead people, I think, in 3 other groups, because there were probably 7 groups on the river that day at least. 3 people had similar experiences in that they got done there and they swam out through sieved out lines. And 2 of them weren't too bad, but one other guy who I know quite well, he took a different route, and he had current under there, and he had multiple trees and tight little gaps and stuff. And like, he was under there for several minutes, and he fought to save his own life to find his way through this underwater maze kind of thing. And he had a pretty shitty experience kind of thing. So anyway, bit of a shitty time. I lost a lot of skin off my feet from borrowing someone else's Tevas on that run out. So I went up to my tail between my leg, went up to my girlfriend's house, which was further away from where I lived, and hung out there for a week or 2 and just kind of recovered physically and mentally and stuff, and took a decent break on paddling. Almost had a little midlife crisis of thinking about, do I want to keep kayaking again, and where do I stand and sit with all of this stuff and all of that, and decided like, yeah, I do want to get back on the horse eventually, and certainly went back to easier water for quite a while and stuff. I went back to that river a year later. This will be the last story I'll tell you, Kevin. A year later, and we got down to a hard rapid, which is just above that lower section, which is considered easier than the upper section. And there's that legend of New Zealand paddling called Olaf Kohler, who's from Wyoming, who's got this giant beard, and he looks like he's in ZZ Top. And he's a machine. Like, he's an older dude, and he is so strong. Not always he would admit himself, not always the most technically proficient climber, but someone who gets it done. And he used to come to New Zealand probably 12 years in a row or something ridiculous, and would hang out for 2 or 3 months and get stuff done. And so he and I decided to paddle the first rapid called Knuckle Grinder together. And we kind of, went down that, like, in I guess a sort of buddy system, and fractioned off out of our larger group, let's say, kind of thing, 2 of us. And so bit of intro water, and then the whole river chunders under this undercut rock that looks like a sperm whale's mouth, basically. And the whole river's chundering under there and then coming out almost at a 90-degree left bend, some of it filtering out the back of this undercut and stuff. Not a pretty thing. Then below that is a really sticky weir and then a really manky rapid. So I got out. Ollie and I ran that successfully, no issues, pull over. I sort of said to him, because he's not one to sort of get out of his boat too much and run around the riverbank, whereas I am. And so I was like, do you want to stay in your boat? I'll go and do some safety at the weir. And he's like, yep, cool. And so I went up to the weir because my logic was this is super sticky. If someone gets stuck in this hydraulic, I can bag them out to the side and they don't have to swim the shallow, shitty rapid kind of thing. So I got my rope out, got ready, standing there, and the little birdie or the light bulb or the voice or the whatever in my head told me to go to the undercut. And I was like, no, this is the place to be. I can do something effective here. I can throw my rope in. I can save someone, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, go to the undercut. It's like, no, I probably can't do very much in the undercut apart from stand there and watch. Stay here. It was like, go to the undercut. And so finally I was like, okay, I'll go to the undercut. And so I walked up to the undercut, which was further upstream, and I'm standing probably 6 or 7 meters above it, just hanging out. And my mate Russell, who was a raft guide who worked in Norway quite a bit, he came down. He was paddling a Piranha Storm, which was admittedly maybe a slightly too small a boat to have had on the river, maybe. But again, we are talking late 90s, so that's kind of how you rolled as well. And so he came down, he got pushed off line, and he got shoved straight into the face of this undercut. So as soon as he came into it, he put his hands up to try and stop himself, and the force of the current just folded him onto the back deck and stuffed him under there. And so I immediately took action, and so there was an eddy immediately below me, which was to the side of the main force of the current. And so just as I jumped down into that eddy and I turned to take action, I just saw that his fingertips and the tail of his boat, because imagine he's folded back on the back deck, his hands are the furthermost part of his body towards the tail of the boat. So I just see his fingertips and the tail of the boat starting to disappear. And again, I didn't do anything particularly heroic here, but if I hadn't been standing here, he would have died. And so I reached in, and this is kind of a little bit weird in itself. Well, the whole voice telling me to go there was kind of weird in itself. But as I reached in, his fingertips touched my forearm. And I don't know if this was just the adrenaline surging in me at that moment, or if it's because I'd been in a similar situation of being fucked underwater, essentially. And in that moment, I felt like I was feeling everything that he was feeling. And I just kept reaching, and I found his neck. And so I just grabbed him by the neck, and I pulled him and his boat out of there. And the current had definitely pushed them in and chopped them to one side, because there's no way on earth that I would have even been able to pull them out against the main current. Like, that was not a thing.
Sure.
And so what he expressed later on is that because of the buoyancy of the boat and his life jacket, he wasn't able to roll upside down. Even though this was just microseconds, he wasn't able to roll upside down, and he wasn't able to bring his arm around to try and get to a spray skirt either, kind of thing. And so, he knew straight away that I'd saved his life, and he was just like, thanks, man. And that was pretty much it, and that's all it needed to be, Anyway, so we carried on that river, and he went back to Norway and stuff. I had, a lot of learning implanted on me from that day as far as pre-preparation and bothering to stand at the spot that you think is nasty, and where something might kick off. And also that whole listen to your instincts and be guided by them, whether it's, I don't think I want to go boating today, or I'm not sure about this flow, or maybe I'll walk this rapid today, or whatever. And because I spin people out all the time, they'll watch me run something hard, and then the next moment they'll see me walk something easy, and they're like, what planet are you on right now? And I'm like, oh, the wind's blowing the wrong direction for me, and I don't bother explaining it to everyone because it's not worth it. But yeah, I'm fully guided by that premonition. Oh, sorry, not premonition, that instinctive thinking, and that intuition.
Yeah. Are you a believer that there's some higher power that's guiding you and talking to you, or do you think that it's just
No, not
the
really.
human's ability to absorb all kinds of things subconsciously
Yeah,
that
yeah. I think it's possibly that. Who knows? But yeah, I do like, again, around that time, intuition, listening to the light bulb that got me in trouble off the river quite a lot, watching Star Wars and thinking about the Force, and on a personal level, like on personal boating, like learning a lot more about visualization, whether it's for running a rapid or for rescue, even, and starting to have some more like out there, deeper thinking or openness to different ideas and stuff. So I think it's probably a whole bunch of things combining. And so what also came of that experience as well. So I didn't see Russell for a year because he worked in Norway, but he came back a year later and he said to me, "I've got a story for you." And I was like, "Cool," because I love a good story, particularly if it's on the naughty or rude side. But he was like, "So I saved a woman's life in Norway this year, and it was somewhere where we don't normally bother to do safety, but that experience on the Perth has changed me a little bit, and
wow.
that had an impact on me saving her life." And so that was like really profound, that my own near-death experience on that river helped me save my mate's life on that river. And then Russell got to go and save someone's life, and it's just like, wow, that's pretty trippy too, kind of thing. So I like, that story and some of the other things with you that I've shared. Like, I like talking about this stuff. And like I say, it's not me trying to grandstand or put myself on some pedestal, but it's like, here's some interesting shit that hopefully some other people can learn something out of, so that we're not all having to repeat the same mistakes, kind of thing. And I love hearing, as grim as it can be, like Charlie Warbridge and the American Whitewater Association, and all of his reports that he does on near miss and fatalities and stuff, like, that stuff, or watching rescue videos on YouTube and stuff. Like, there's a ton of learning there, and trying to put ourselves, I watch that stuff and I hear about it or I read about it. I try to put myself in that position. What would I do? What could I do? How would I act? Am I weak at that? If I am weak at that, how do I go and upskill myself so that I can be better? Because I don't want to be in that situation where I watch someone die. I want to be the best I can be, as fit as I can be, as current as I can be, on a river that I should be on rather than one I shouldn't be on, so that I can contribute to the team and contribute to other people. Is kind of my approach. And that's where my life learning and my paddling learning has taken me. And a lot of by starting at a young age and paddling, a lot of my life learning has echoed my paddling learning, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's interesting how these some pretty serious experiences have kind of informed how you approach your river running. And I imagine your decision to get back into paddling probably stipulated that you would take some lessons and learn how to prevent these things in the future.
Totally. Otherwise, I think I'd be a moron. If I just shelved all that away and pretended it never happened or whatever, and like that would take a special type of idiot. But then I know other people who hear some of these experiences and they're like, I probably wouldn't paddle anymore if that had happened to me or someone I knew or something. And I understand that as well. And I've got another friend who lost consciousness pinned on the bottom of a river, and he blacked out just before he exited the kayak, and probably when his body went limp, that's when he got ripped out by the current. And he was someone, paddling was his life, and he paddled at a high level, but he doesn't really choose to paddle or probably wouldn't do anything more than grade 3 anymore. And I totally get that, and I respect that. I understand it.
You see that a lot. Yeah. I mean, my take has always been, if I look at the situation and it's like, well, if I understand what went wrong, and I feel like there's a reasonable chance that I can prevent that from happening again, then I'll do it. But if it's like, no, there's all these undetermined factors, I don't know what happened, I don't know how to prevent it, then I shouldn't be doing it. I think I've always tried to take a very analytical, logical approach. And I think those are the long-term paddlers that you see, I think, in the sport, are the ones that look at things analytically and don't make just kind of rash emotional decisions all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it's interesting. There's a river here called the Lee. There's a rapid on that called Plastic Surgeons. So you can let your mind wander as to what happened there, possibly. And it's a great rapid. It's a fantastic river, but there's one aspect of that river where there's a slot to the side of the main double drop waterfall, and it's not attractive at all to me. And a lot of people run this rapid, much weaker paddlers than myself and stuff. And everyone here, like the culture that I've come across so far is largely just like, oh, everyone seems to. So people drop into the slot thing, and then you're essentially probably taking the 4 meter drop of the waterfall once you've dropped into the slot. And then you're still stuck in not a cave, but a hydraulic and waterfall that's extended into underneath a rock shelf type thing. So it's
weird.
It's not a totally attractive situation in my world. And for now, like I ran it once, and then I was like, I'm probably not going to run that again. But then the second run I did, I came down and I was like, fuck it, it'll be fine. But then I was just up at the river recently and did 2 more runs, and I walked it. And it's not a spot that excites me. And often a spot that doesn't excite me is also a spot that's hard to access, because it's not just about me running it and my safety and my health and well-being. It's like, if I choose to paddle this river and other people are running this, how can I help them? Because I want to be prepared and I want to help other people, and I do not want to watch other people die. But that's a spot where I'm like, this is really, really hard. Like, you'd almost need to be set up on an abseil to offer any assistance, and that assistance might be very little potentially. And there's no trees or easy rock anchors. And a few of us are talking about bolting some anchors there, and we probably will. But it's just a rapid that doesn't spin my wheels. And I'd quite happily paddle a different rapid that was much harder. But that spot there is not for me and doesn't excite me. And part of that's because I've been stuck underwater and seen people stuck underwater in a sieve or a tree or whatever, and it's not a happy time. And I don't want to see any more of that than I need to.
Yeah. What's worth it? What's not worth it?
Yeah. But no, I appreciate the opportunity to speak, Kevin, and I hope that some of my ramblings might hit a note for some people in their mind, or help them shape their experience. And as I said to you earlier on, like I'm a huge advocate for river rescue training through courses, and also building it into part of people's everyday paddling. I take my pin kit, my rope, and my other relevant rescue kit on every single river that I do. Carry a pruning saw every time I go boating, and it's not just a little baby thing. It's something that it's at least 7 or 8 inches long, and sometimes I'm actually carrying a bigger saw than that. And I've had to use those. I've had to cut people off trees, and I've known 2 people have had their lives saved by being cut out of their kayaks by a pruning saw, whereas a river knife, a serrated river knife, wouldn't have got that job done, And I used to look down my nose a little bit at some of the like fully geared up rescue nerds when I was younger, and think, well, you're just carrying all that because you're a shit boater. Why don't you just get better at boating and this other stuff and that? But I think there's a balance, and sometimes I have too much gear occasionally, and then I'm aware of it impacting my own paddling, which I think then becomes a safety issue as well. So you can have too much stuff, but the way I look at it is I want to have everyone with my teams, each individual member, to have a knife that they can access with one hand, a whistle, obviously some extra food, maybe a warm layer or a hot head or something that they can put on if they start getting cold. I want them to have a throw bag, which is not some pathetic shoelace type diameter. Ideally something about 18 to 20 meters long, a floating rope. I often have the length of that rope written on the bag. I have the midpoint of that rope marked. I have the end of the rope with some coloured red insulation tape around it so I can find it really easily. And I'm wearing a rescue jacket. Whether people have a tow line or not, that's their personal choice. I've actually gone away from paddle beaners. I prefer a screw gate pear shape, because I've been around multiple people getting accidentally clipped to rafts or to a wire fence or to a rope, stuff like that. So I carry a pear-shaped carabiner that's locked when it's on my PFD. And then in my pin kit, I've got, also in my front pocket, I've got that 4 to 5 meter 1 inch wide tubular webbing. And I'll have an overhand knot on a bight tied in one end, so that I just need to tie another on the other end quickly. I can create an anchor. And then in my pin kit, I've got a pruning saw, minimum 7 inches long. I've got 3 to 4 prussiks. I'd expect people to have a minimum of 3, and 2 of those will be longer and maybe 1 shorter for their anchor prussik. And I'll be able to easily salvage out of my boat and off myself 4 to 5 lockable carabiners quite easily. And I'll have 2 to 3 prussik mining pulleys. And then I might have some other bells and whistles, like sometimes, not very often, sometimes I carry the old crossline reach or other. Do you know what that is?
No.
So there's a guy, I'm not totally into his promotion of this and himself in the States, but it's basically like, if you think of it like a grappling hook that essentially has almost 3 carabiner gates on it, and you can feed the rope through it. So you can throw it over to another bank and use it like a grappling hook, literally, which might trash it after 2 or 3 of those throws. Or you can throw it over another rope to enable you to capture that rope with you. It's got heaps of different uses. And so sometimes I carry that. Other times, a friend here in Tassie has made a little device using a 40 millimeter plumbing pipe end cap, and he's just cut it into a little shape, put a hole in the middle of it so you can feed a rope onto it, and it's got these symmetrical repeating pattern shape around it, which is more likely to hook a rope. So that's a really light version of the same thing. And I'll also carry a clamp with me, and that clamp, all it really is 2 aluminium plates that have a bolt through them with some foam stuck to the inside of the aluminium, and a butterfly style nut and a bit of cord on it. And so that probably measures 2 inches by 1.5 inches. And that enables me to clamp that up to the shaft, to the blade of my paddle, whilst I clamp a carabiner in it with a rope fed into that carabiner and the carabiner gate open. And the bit of cord attached to that device goes around the shaft. And I'm happy to post pictures or something if anyone ever wanted to see this thing. A friend made one for me, and then my rescue kit got stolen, so I made one for myself, and I make some for other people. So what it means is that I can extend my reach by the length of my paddle, and I can connect a carabiner, because I can link it to maybe a mate's life jacket or to his boat, and then I can rip the paddle away, and the carabiner and the rope are now attached to that boat, and the little clampy thing is still attached to the shaft of my paddle, so I haven't lost it. And now I've been able to maybe reach someone who is out of reach. And so I've probably made that for myself out of bloody $20 worth of materials and an hour's worth of effort, and it's not super heavy. You can get some little different versions. Other people try taping, carry some insulation tape, and they might tape a carabiner to their paddle shaft.
Yeah, I've seen that kind of thing done.
And potentially, but again, I'm happy to carry that little bit of extra weight, because the day I didn't take that and someone died just out of my reach, I have to live with myself, and I don't want to live with that. I want to be able to try and reach someone and help them, So yeah, so that's kind of my general gear. Sometimes I throw in some other crap depending on the mood. And ironically, again, some of the days that I've thrown that other junk in, I've actually properly needed it. And I'm like, this is kind of weird too. Where it's like I might have taken out a flare and put a torch in. And then we've been overnighted at 2 a.m. I'm like, I've never overnighted before. And I'm stoked that I put a torch in, because this is the first time in my life I've carried a torch. And so I don't know, weird stuff like that as well. And so I just roll with whatever the little light bulb tells me to do, don't question it too much.
What's your take on the gear thing? What's your take on the waist belts? Because that came up a couple of times in your stories, like a throw rope waist belt.
I'm not into them when I'm kayaking, but my throw rope in my boat has a waist belt on it. Okay. And that's great for swimming and going to, whether you're getting out to scout or whether you are swimming to go and undertake a rescue. And the bag that I go for, I've got 20 meters of rope. It's a bag that's slightly compact, and it's a little bit of a pain in the ass to stuff, but it's great for on my body because it's not too bulky. And I get a shop to, they produce these to sell to a kayak school. They publicly sell them. And I go in there, I probably annoy them a little bit, but I'm like, can you do these slightly differently for me? Because I've got my version of it that I like. And, and I carry a few of those around with me if people, not for profit, but just if people want to buy one, then I've got them. So just a few tweaks on it just to make it a little bit different. And what's interesting on that, like I don't have a quick release buckle on that belt. And again, after Rolf's experience, it's like, well, is that guy an idiot because he witnessed that and stuff? And so I'm very aware every time, whether I had a quick release buckle or not, I'm very aware every time that I put that around my waist of the potential of it to kill me. And that decision, this could kill me right now, this decision right now and stuff. But I don't want it coming and losing it when I don't want it lost kind of thing. Mm. And so that's the choice that I make. I wouldn't advocate for that for most people. I would say go quick release buckle for sure. Because, and for people who don't get it and think like, oh, a little plastic buckle will break. It's like, okay, we'll go and buy one from the outdoor store, tie some tape to it, set up some mechanical advantage and see what it takes to actually break that thing. And make sure you're standing out of the way when you try to break it because they're incredibly strong, and even if you buy an old nasty life jacket and try and break the buckles on that, people will be blown away by how strong they are. So I like to have a bag that I can put on my waist for scouting and for swimming, but I definitely choose not to carry after Rolf's experience and also seeing 2 or 3 other ropes accidentally spill out of the bag. And one of them was in a rodeo. And it's like, well, who needs a bloody throw bag in a rodeo? Like, what are you doing with your rope around your waist in the first place, But I understand in other situations, like when I'm pack crafting, I carry one around my waist, but you put it so the bag's in front of you because otherwise it's pushing on the back band. And so I'm very aware of the risk that I'm taking on that day, but having it attached to the boat or inside the boat or in a dry bag or wherever doesn't really spin my wheels kind of thing. And I carry my pin kit in a dry bag in the back of my boat, and that carabiner I do lock up just so I don't lose it, whereas my throw bag, when it's clipped into the back of the boat, that carabiner is not done up so that I can access it faster. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely.
And same thing, pruning saw, if I'm carrying a bigger pruning saw, is in the back of the boat. Something that I've just found recently, because like I say, that waist belt dry bag that I used to have was fantastic, but I've never been able to find one. Whereas I just found on Amazon, there's a Norwegian, if I can plug a company, there's a Norwegian company, and I want to say it's called Skog, Skog, and this is the weirdest name. It's called Skogo Norsk fanny pack or something like that. And so it's it's like a bum bag, but it's actually waterproof. And so what I'm doing now, and I don't know how waterproof it is, I've just got one, but I can fit all my pin kit in that. And I'm carrying that because it's got the waist belt. I'm carrying that inside another little dry bag. So now I have the versatility. Sure, it takes me another 10 seconds to undo the second bag and get the gear out. But if I ever need to go swims with my rescue kit, I'm versatile and I'm good to go kind of thing. And so that's kind of how I'm rolling right at the moment. And like I say, that gear, all that gear that I've mentioned goes with me everywhere. Whether even if I often paddle, I'm trying to think, I'm so old school now that I don't even know where the category sits, but I often paddle in a zone 240, which is like a 25-year-old playboat.
Yeah.
Got lots more modern playboats for those who think I'm antiquated, but it's kind of my favorite boat, and it's a great little river runner. And having that rescue kit in the back of that boat messes with my performance as far as my river running, my playboating, whatever, but I'm not going boating without that gear because that's the commitment I've made to all other river users that I get on the river with, and that's the commitment my friends have made to me, and when I'm rolling with my team, my buddies know, they don't need to ask, have you got this? Have you bought that? Did you forget it today? Where is it in your boat? Like, they know that it's there, and again, we all forget our throw rope that one time or whatever. But if that ever happens, it's like, dudes, start of the trip, I'm really sorry. I've forgotten your throw bag. Can I carry yours today or something? Rather than hiding from it and going, oh, well, hopefully no one notices and hopefully I don't need it. Again, team responsibility. If I've forgotten something on that rare time, let everyone else know so that we can plan for it accordingly. Because otherwise, my mates want to run to my boat and they know what's in there if they need to use it, and they can get it done.
Certainly, can prevent a future accident. Yeah, well, very cool. That's a cool list, and yeah, I totally appreciate you spending the time to go through the safety theme and kind of talk about how that formulated. And I think this will resonate. I think certainly a lot of people out there will listen to this and be very curious about. I think there's a lot, even for me. There's a lot for me to think about, lessons I can take away from this. Better for you to experience the near-death experiences and learn from it than me.
Sure. Yeah. And the way I look at it as well is like we've all got different learnings in paddling or around the river or on our pathways. And by sharing those experiences and stepping up and challenging things when we think they aren't right or they aren't as good as they should be, that's where we can all contribute to the sport. And even a beginner can do that, because again, a beginner, they might be a kid or they might be an adult. And as an adult, it's like, sure, we might have experienced risk driving or whatever, teamwork through sport or whatever. Like, we've all got experiences and knowledge that can link to the growth of the team, even though we might be inexperienced as a kayaker. We're all part of the equation, is how I look at it, to make it better and safer.
Absolutely. It's part of contributing to the community. Yeah, cool. Well, thanks so much, Gareth. It was great talking to you. Really appreciate you spending the time. If I had more time and we weren't already on an epic interview, I'd pick some funny stories from you too, so we can break up the seriousness. But I think this is cool, and I think it'll resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity, Kevin, and I hope it does resonate for the community. I feel a little bit weird talking about myself on such a public forum, but it's for the greater cause, hopefully, and that safety thing is what sort of drew me in, I think.